Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Very glad to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Evening is here, and just seems like a good time to do a little drinking and a little thinking. So come join me if you will. I'd be honored if you would. And hopefully, we'll learn something today that we didn't know yesterday. Bring what you got, of course, or nothing at all. Don't feel obligated. I brought the old Earl Grey tonight, which is a nice way to end the day, you know? So anyway, cheers to you. And Jesus too. Can always count on the Earl Grey. So, actually, before we start today's article, I just wanted to read a short article by Dr. Ron Paul. Was a congressman, very smart guy, very good guy, and I've read a couple articles of his before. They're too good, you know. I just want to share them. But before we get into that, I'd actually like to share a little story with you, just to kind of frame the context here. And it was a story that I was read to as a child, and it seems like other people weren't. Most Americans, maybe you didn't hear this story or know this story. I just feel like there's a lot of lessons that Americans in general haven't learned. So I just want to share it real quick and just get your thoughts or feelings, just bring it to your attention. I'll make it quick. The story is called The Emperor's New Clothes. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'll summarize real quick. There was this emperor. He was the leader of a country, and you had these two clothes makers, right? I will call them profiteers, people who want to put profit over everything. They came to town, and they told the emperor, "We're going to make you the best outfit you've ever seen. It's going to be the bestest ever. No outfit will ever be like this in history," right? And the emperor said, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Go ahead, make it." And so the profiteers made their clothing, right? But the thing is, they didn't have anything. And the emperor actually visited them once and said, "Hey, what are you making it out of?" And they said, "Oh, this fine thread that only the smartest people can see. It's magic, right? It's magical. If you're a fool, you won't be able to see these clothes." So the emperor said, "Oh, well, I'm not a fool, so I clearly can see these clothes that you're making." And that was that, right? So anyway, the day came, right? They made the clothes, and they presented them to the emperor. And he said, "Oh my, what a magnificent outfit you've made for me." And the profiteers said, we see that you appreciate quality." And so the emperor took off his clothes, and the profiteers helped him put on his new outfit. And then he looked at himself in the mirror and admired it for a second, and then he strolled into the throne room or whatever and showed himself to the ministers. And the ministers, wanting to save face, not wanting to embarrass the king, not wanting their heads to be removed from their bodies, they said, "My, what a beautiful outfit you have, your highness," right? And they went along with it. And this inspired the emperor, who had his ego stroked a little bit, right? Oh, everybody loves this outfit. So he decided to show himself before the people. He wanted to have a parade to display his magnificence and his outfit, his new clothes. And so he left his estate and started to walk among his people. And naturally, the people, seeing their emperor in a state of undress, were a little embarrassed at first. However, not wanting to offend their leader, not wanting to be seen as fools themselves, decided to go along with it, right? Nobody said anything. And the emperor kept walking until he ran into a little boy, a little small child, who chuckled and pointed his little finger right at the emperor and said, "My, the emperor has no clothes." And it was then the people all began to look around at each other and realize how silly and how stupid they'd been. And then the ministers, in turn, began to look at the people and then themselves and realize how silly and stupid they'd been. And then the emperor, looking around at people looking around at him, looked at himself and realized that he indeed had no clothes, and realized how silly and stupid he'd been. The end. Alright. Like I said, I hope that provides a little bit of context for what I'm about to read. It's a classic. It's a classic, you know, and that one's old, a couple 100 years old if I remember right, and I just feel like people haven't learned the lesson. And now let's get to reading. Dr. Ron Paul wrote this article called Kabul Has Fallen, but Don't Blame Biden. And it reads as follows. August 16th. This weekend, the U.S. experienced another, quote, Saigon moment, this time in Afghanistan. After a 20-year war that drained trillions from Americans' pockets, the capital of Afghanistan fell without a fight. The corrupt Potemkin regime that the U.S. had been propping up for 2 decades, and the Afghan military that we had spent billions training, just melted away. The rush is on now to find somebody to blame for the chaos in Afghanistan. Many of the, quote, experts doing the finger-pointing are the ones most to blame. Politicians and pundits who played cheerleader for this war for 2 decades are now rushing to blame President Biden for finally getting the U.S. out. Where were they when succeeding presidents continued to add troops and expand the mission in Afghanistan? The U.S. war on Afghanistan was not lost yesterday in Kabul. It was lost the moment it shifted from a limited mission to apprehend those who planned the attack on 9/11 to an excuse in regime change and nation building. Immediately after the 9/11 attacks, I proposed that we issue letters of marque and reprisal to bring those responsible to justice. But such a limited and targeted response to the attack was ridiculed at the time. How could the U.S. war machine and all its allied profiteers make their billions if we didn't put on a massive war? So who is to blame for the scenes from Afghanistan this weekend? There's plenty to go around. Congress has kicked the can down the road for 20 years, continuing to fund the Afghan war long after even they understood that there was no point to the U.S. occupation. There were some efforts by some members to end the war, but most, on a bipartisan basis, just went along to get along. The generals and other high-ranking military officers lied to their commander-in-chief and to the American people for years about progress in Afghanistan. The same is true for the U.S. intelligence agencies. Unless there is a major purge of those who lied and misled, we can count on these disasters to continue until the last U.S. dollar goes up in smoke. The military-industrial complex spent 20 years on the gravy train with the Afghanistan war. They built missiles, they built tanks, they built aircraft and helicopters. They hired armies of lobbyists and think tank writers to continue the lie that was making them rich. They wrapped their graft up in the American flag, but they are the opposite of patriots. The mainstream media has uncritically repeated the propaganda of the military and the political leaders about Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and all the other pointless U.S. interventions. Many of these outlets are owned by defense industry-connected companies. The corruption is deep. American citizens must also share some blame, until more Americans rise up and demand a pro-America, non-interventionist foreign policy. They will continue to get fleeced by war profiteers. Political control in Afghanistan has returned to the people who fought against those they viewed as occupiers, and for what they viewed as their homeland. That is the real lesson, but don't expect it to be understood in Washington. War is too profitable, and the political leaders are too cowardly to go against the tide. But the lesson is clear for anyone wishing to see it. The U.S. global military empire is a grave threat to the United States and its future. And there you have it. Everybody lied. They lied to the fishes, right? They lie to you and me. They lie to themselves. They lie to the president. And for what? Money, power, status. Some lie just to save face, as in my fairy tale that I told earlier. Don't want to embarrass anybody, right? Can't tell the truth. The truth would just be too horrible. It would be too inconvenient. Well, I challenge you today, everyone, myself included, but generals, soldiers, Americans, all the way up on down to our very president, I challenge you. Were your lies really convenient? 20 years, trillions of dollars, untold lives, American and Afghani, right? How many civilians ended up not making it through this? You don't want to think about that, do you? But I do, and I'm going to make you. How many civilians that we were supposed to be helping, how many of them didn't make it out of this? It's the truth. And no matter how ugly and how horrible it is, we have to embrace it. As Dr. Paul has. It's harsh. I don't want to say it. I don't want to read it. But we have to. Because the consequences of ignoring it are too great. 20 years, trillions of dollars, lives, homes, families. Our freedoms, we've lost so many freedoms in this war on terror. We're surveilled at every corner. We got a government that thinks Americans, normal, average, everyday Joes, are terrorists. You're on some terrorist watch list. You're on a no-fly list because you're a patriot and you love your country. What kind of backwards government does that? That's what we pulled from this war. One of the many gems that we pulled from this war. And all the while, the profiteers, the generals got their promotions. The weapons makers sold their weapons and made a killing. Literally and figuratively. No pun intended there. I love English sometimes. Actually, most times. I don't want to get distracted. What else is there to say? The emperor has no clothes. The generals have no clothes. The president had no clothes, right? But nobody wanted to say anything. They wanted the gravy train to keep going, and they wanted to save face. And here we are, 20 years later, and your lies have cost us more than if we would have just told the truth and admitted to ourselves that this was not working, that the cost was not worth it. Was it all for nothing? Maybe. If there's any hope we can take from this, it's that maybe we as Americans will realize that nation building doesn't work. Didn't work in Vietnam. Didn't work in Afghanistan, and it never was going to work. So maybe we'll learn the lesson this time. And as far as Afghanistan goes, maybe, just maybe, people who grew up under the U.S. occupation might have a spark of freedom. They might have the light lit in their hearts, and maybe they'll want to do something about it. But the change has to come from them. We can't do it. And it's not our job. It's not our responsibility. They have to want it, and they have to fight for it themselves. But then again, the example that the U.S. set for democracy and freedom wasn't exactly the best. And I covered that in my last video. I encourage you to check it out. But we weren't exactly the best messengers for the cause. Once again, I don't want to say it. I hate saying it. But it's the truth. And ignoring the truth will lead to greater consequences than embracing it. Anyway, I think that's about it. I will dismount the pulpit now. I really hope you think about that one. It's kind of important to me. I hold these things dear in my heart, and that's why I do this. That's really why I do this. This is one of the reasons why I wake up in the morning, is to share the truth, no matter how horrible it is, you know? Because we can make them better, right? If you have a sick patient and you ignore the fact that they're sick, right? They're not going to get better, right? They need medicine, they need help. So by embracing the ugly truth, the fact that they're sick, by embracing the disease and the symptoms and the coughing and the fever, you know, we can help them get better. And I truly believe that. So, don't shoot the messenger. Please. Trying to help. Anyway, I hope you all have a good weekend. I hope you got something out of that. Here in Northern California, we got a lot of smoke, a lot of fires, so keep those people in my thoughts and prayers. I really feel for them. You know, it seems to be a yearly occurrence now, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully we get some better leadership that will clear out more brush and hire more firefighters. I mean, whatever it takes, you know. But yeah, my prayers go out to those people. And wherever you're at, you know, something's going on personally, or maybe in your town or your state, whatever, let me know, or reach out to somebody, please. You know, don't try and do it alone. We're in this together, and even if I can just say a prayer for you, you know, I hope things get better. If you're struggling, whatever. If things are going well, I pray that they keep going well. So, nobody likes to go through a bad time. And especially, you know, if you're going through an awesome time right now, things are great for you. I'm happy for you. I really am. You know, it's good to be on the up. So, I hope that the up keeps upping, right? So, yeah. I hope you have a good night. I hope you'll check out the description below for any show notes or ways to support the channel. Please leave me a comment. I like comments. I like banter and debate and new thoughts, new ideas, new opinions. I really do. I like those sorts of things. Even if I disagree with them, you know, I still can appreciate the uniqueness and difference of your opinion. You know, maybe you see something differently than me because you have information that I don't have yet. You know, I want to hear it. So leave a comment, and yeah. I think that's about it. Take care, everyone. Good night.